right. Welcome to the Sunday Sewcase with Parliament Quilts and Crafts. I am Latanya Patillo, proprietor at Parliament Quilts and Crafts, and I am here today to have a wonderful conversation with my friend, quilt and textile artist, Miss Kristin LaFlamme. So welcome, Kristin.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. We're excited to have you. As you know, we normally have live Sunday showcases, but this, because of scheduling and all of that, is a recording. And so we're going to have a conversation. And as folks who are viewing this later on have questions, please feel free to submit this in the chat. And Kristin has agreed so wonderfully to come back and answer the questions that you pose at a later date. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm looking forward to learning from you and hearing all of the wonderful things that you have been doing. So we'll get started, and I'll introduce you a little bit and share with our listeners and our viewers a little bit about you. All right. Are you ready to hear more about yourself?
This is always the fun part.
Yes. All right. Kristin LaFlamme has been making and exhibiting art quilts for several decades. They always have a narrative, whether expressing yearning for a home with roots, the experiences of an army wife, or remembrance, such as the quilts for the Social Justice Sewing Academy. The fabrics she chooses add to the meaning of the finished piece. Kristin has always been artistic, having learned how to sew at an early age. She's pursued many art forms and focused on graphic design in college. And when introduced to quilting after marrying into a family of quilters, she took to the craft easily, given her creative background. Kristin has found quilting to be an exciting outlet that combines the same elements of color, shape, and pattern she had been drawn to in graphic design. Her experience working with a variety of fabrics and years of creating her own designs has been helpful in guiding customers and sharing resources. I'm reading this from this wonderful book, Quilt Your Story, that Kristin has written and shared through Landauer Publishing. And so as we talk through these projects, you'll learn more about all of her wonderful quilting activities and escapades. And I'm just looking forward to talking more about this and your other pursuits. So how about we get started?
All right.
All right. So our first question, Kristin, is always tell us about what brought you to quilting.
So what you just read actually is a hint at it. I've been artistic all my life, always encouraged to draw and paint and whatever. I went to college to be a graphic designer. And then I met my to-be husband. And one weekend, one of his sisters said, "Hey, you guys want to come to Amish quilt country with me? Spend a weekend looking at quilts and stuff." Because she was already a quilter, and so was their mom and other sister. So I said, "Sure, sounds like fun." So we went to Enterprise, Pennsylvania, and went to all these shops and looked around, and I was like, "Oh, these are pretty. Well, I know how to sew. I could make a quilt." And came home and designed a quilt.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And then the rest, it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yes, yes. Now, what were you sewing before quilt? Were you sewing garments and apparels, or how were you sewing before quilting?
Yeah, home deck kind of stuff, slip covers. This was, way back in the early 90s. So shabby chic slip covers for chairs. Earlier than that, it was clothes for dolls. I collected those plastic Breyer horses. Mm-hmm. They're like that big, so you can make all kinds of accessories for them. So all my horses had, handmade blankets, horse blankets,
Right.
But I was also painting and drawing and, just making things. There was a lot of DIY going on in the household, from both my mom's side and my dad's.
Mm-hmm.
So just basically crafty all around.
Sure.
And when I entered, and then I studied graphic design for 4 years in school, in college, and then worked for another 4 years before we started traveling with the military, which my husband joined it right after we got married.
Yes.
And so when his first assignment was in Germany. And so now I'm learning German, and it was really hard to find a graphic design job because the Army wasn't offering a whole lot of graphic design jobs. And I wasn't feeling like I could communicate well enough in German to get a job at a German firm. So we decided to start our family, but also I had discovered quilting through my in-laws and thought, oh, just like graphic design, quilting is combining all these disparate elements, different pieces of fabric, different sizes of fabric, different types of fabric, maybe.
Yes.
And then I start learning the blocks have names, and that's got great narrative possibility.
Yes. I love that. The narrative piece, the telling of the story, right? And the history, and bringing all of your experiences into the piece, I think is really, really powerful. So it was family, it was connecting to the Amish community, it was pulling together all of the skills and your interests and the different pieces. I like the fact that we call it piecing, and you create a piece. It's just all of those connections, all of those unique blocks. That is really exciting.
Yeah. Quilting just happened to scratch all the itches.
Yeah. Love it. And let me just say, you mentioned way back in the 90s. I had to laugh at that timing, right? Because I still feel pretty young, but yeah, I guess way back in the 90s was some time, right? Considering where we are.
Yeah. I mean, we were grown-ass adults in the 90s already, right. But quilting wise, when I started quilting, the books I was reading, my Fons and Porter complete guide, I'm trying to look over on the bookshelf.
Sure.
They're still talking about making templates out of cereal boxes.
Right.
And, relatively early on, I was able to go to a local quilt shop in Virginia where we lived at the time and take a class on how to use a rotary ruler and rotary cutter. And that was this was the cutting edge technology at the time. Wow. Now we all take it for granted.
Right.
And I should show you my inspiration. I brought my very first quilt. This is the first one I started.
Yes.
Not necessarily the first one I finished.
Okay.
I was really, what inspired me was a quilt that had relatively plain block, but then it's really pretty sashing. And so I went home and I drew a picture of it, and I figured out how to do it. And of course, when you're first starting, you don't know what you don't know. So it's all Y seams.
Wow.
And, this is in the 90s. And so I hand quilted every block.
Wow.
And they're beer labels because we were into little, small brewery kind of things.
Sure.
So there's my first quilt.
Oh my goodness, that is gorgeous. How ambitious was that for your first quilt? I mean, that is major. Not only did you do Y seams, but you hand quilted it. It looks like it's relatively large, right?
It fits over the top of a bed, so it's not king size, but yeah, it's kind of big. And I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right. Right. But clearly you had plenty of support and guidance to help you get through that.
Yeah.
And make something that you want to keep, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not awful.
Right.
In fact, actually now, 30, 40 years later, it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's not the first quilt that I finished, because while I was working on that, I set it aside for a while, especially when it was at the quilting phase, because that took forever. And I started making baby quilts for friends.
Okay.
So there was 3 or 4 baby quilts that got done at the same time.
Right.
got finished before this did.
Right. And you could finish 4 baby quilts before you finish that one, right? If you
Right. And I was hand
sewing.
quilting the baby quilts too, but much simpler. I wasn't trying to like recreate beer labels on them. I was just
Right.
1/4 inch from the edges of everything.
Yes, that is excellent. So your stitching was beer label. You were replicating beer labels.
Yeah, microbreweries that we liked.
Wow, how creative. And that's what I love as I learn more about your work, right? The things that you bring into your quilting, into your story, are not what I call the usual suspects, right? You're not doing the similar stitching. So you have your own ideas for how to bring your unique perspective into your quilts. I think that is really, really exciting. So that was your first quilt.
Mm-hmm.
And then you moved into you had your baby quilts.
Yep.
As you think about your progress, in your ability to decide, okay, now I want to try something new. Tell us a little bit about what inspires you, maybe who inspires you to do something different, or is it really, I have this idea, let me just try and put this idea into a quilt? Tell us a little bit about your inspiration.
So I was thinking about this, and I am inspired by like everything around me. I feel like I'm just a sponge and I'm just looking at things. And one day it could be the color of some flowers in the yard, and another day it's something I heard on the news, and another time it's a book that I'm reading or a TV show I'm watching. I've got series of I tend to work in series now. So for quite a while, it was my impressions of Germany. We lived in Germany for the better part of 12 years. So kind of more landscapey work, abstracted landscapes, but reflecting what I was seeing around me in Germany. Then it was houses with roots, because as a military family, it's hard to put down roots. So you wish you could have that. So I can put it in a quilt. And then it became more like political, social justice, social commentary. That's the words I'm looking for. So social commentary quilts. And I'm still, I would say, more social commentary than anything else. But for the last 9 years, I've been working at a sewing center. And so I'm making a lot of traditional quilts as samples for the sewing center. Traditionally pieced quilts from patterns. Some are very modern, but still, from patterns, reproducible blocks, that kind of thing. And I just really love the craft. And so that's, informing what I'm doing, that I'm drawn to more block-based, kind of maybe full circle block-based quilts these days. But over the years, I've tried everything. Early on, one of my biggest influences was Ruth McDowell. And she does, or used to do, she's retired now, but she's worth looking up, because she would do pictorial quilts, and they were pieced, but not foundation paper pieced. And her use of fabrics is just super bold. She would use just the craziest fabrics to emulate hair and feathers and flowers and stuff. And you would think, oh, if I'm going to do rocks, I need to use fabric with rocks. And it's like, no, she would use like wild polka dots or stripes going in different directions. And just amazing use of fabric.
Sure.
Ruth B. McDowell. She's got some books out there that are worth looking up.
Wonderful. We have to check her out.
Yeah. So that's.
So thank you. Yes, we have to check out Ruth B. McDowell and understand what was so wonderful about her techniques and her skills that inspire you. So we'll pay attention to hers, and maybe we'll come back and compare notes about her.
All right.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I'm looking at the quilt behind you, and I'm paying attention to what you've mentioned about being block based, right? A lot of your patterns are block based. And when I think about blocks, I think about some of the traditional quilt blocks. Do you consider yourself to be more of a traditional quilter or a modern quilter, or someone who mixes, modern techniques with traditional blocks? How do you view your techniques or your skill set?
I consider myself to be grounded in tradition, but never bound by it.
Sure.
So it's kind of the know the rules so you can break the rules kind of attitude. I love to start with something that's more traditional, or maybe just basic, and then just see where it takes me.
Sure.
I'm kind of the same way as an artist, where I would define myself predominantly as a textile artist or a an art quilter.
Mm-hmm.
But if the message needs something different, like it needs to be a 3D sculpture, or I'm listening to the muse that's telling me I need to use some plastic, I have no problem, that choosing a different medium to get the message across, or working in a different medium. So I would say grounded in tradition, but not bound by it.
I love it. I love it. I always say you have to, in order to think outside of the box, right? Like you have to know the box.
Yeah.
You have to be inside of the box and know the rules in order to break them or think outside the box. So I love that you grounded in tradition, right? And I think that about like the foundational ideas and principles, and then okay, well, I can do it this way, but I also have the freedom to do something different. And you not only do you do that in your designs, but you do that with your materials. So let's talk a little more about the materials that you use, not just for your quilts, but for all of your artistic pursuits. So share a little bit more about that.
That's a lot. So stepping back a little bit, part of the grounded in tradition is the craftspersonship.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do a good 1/4 inch seam, or know when to use something 1/4 inch or larger or smaller, then whatever you're making is going to be well made. And I am constantly striving. I look at some other people's work and I'm just like, oh my God, I could never be that good. But I'm constantly trying to make the things that I make in the best, to my best ability. And then also, oh shoot, now I forget what the other thing I was going to say about that. Oh, and over the years, I've tried all the techniques. And I didn't realize how many I had tried till I started working in a sewing center, and people are like, oh, have you heard about this new thing, ice dyeing? And I'm like, oh, that was so 9 years ago. Right. Been there, done that.
Right.
Fusible applique. I had someone come in and was like, how do I needle turn applique? And everyone else in the shop was like, needle turn applique? Ugh. I'm like, oh, let me tell you about it. Right. So I've tried the, landscape and applique and dyeing and painting on fabric and stamping and collaging and English paper piecing and foundation paper piecing. And so when you've tried all the things, then I keep trying more stuff. Then when you come to create, that thing in your head, you've got all these tools in your toolbox to make it come out through your hand. And it's going to look, you're going to be less frustrated because you have all these resources, and you can say, oh, I want to make these shapes. Well, that's going to be an applique
Mm-hmm.
That's going to look best in applique, or I want to make my blocks so I can chain piece and get these done more efficiently. You know,
Gotcha.
all that kind of stuff. So I apply all that to whatever I'm doing. I love using, I love letting the fabric speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's stories that come with your store-bought fabric because it's got something fun printed on it. It's, spring flowers, or it's corgis, or, whatever you like. um,
Right.
but also it can be clothes that you've worn. It can be, this quilt behind me is made out of my husband's uniforms from 20 years in the military. I took 1 year where I said I'm not going to buy any new to me fabric, or any new off the bolt fabric. It could be new to me, but it couldn't be new fabric.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting like duvet covers at the thrift shop, at the flea markets, and then dyeing them to get the colors I wanted.
Yes.
We were living in Germany, and instead of plastic or paper shopping bags, you can buy, or sometimes there are, promos at events and stuff. You can get cotton shopping totes.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are great because they've got fun things printed on them that add to your project.
Right.
I think back in here, one of these reds used to be a windbreaker. And then, people are purging their stash. Like, okay, well, that's not new, freshly bought stuff. That's just new to me.
Right.
So, so collecting fabrics from different places then means that I have to think about how to use them. Do I need to starch it? Do I need to interface it? Can I use it just how it is? How many layers? Is it better to layer it on top or piece it?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right. Well, that is amazing. And it's interesting to hear you, talk about all of the techniques and all of the things that you've done. And what I found so exciting about quilting and the quilt community, right, is that there is a continuum. And, there are a number of things. You've done all the techniques, but it's always exciting to have someone else come in and say, well, this is new. How do you do this? Right. To be able to say, oh, here, you can provide that guidance, you can provide that instruction. And I think that piece is really powerful too, right? To know that you have something that you want to share with other emerging quilters, emerging textile artists. So I think that's fantastic. And you named so many different techniques. I want to step back a little bit and talk about like this piece around sustainability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this connects directly to your book, right? Quilting Your Story. It is honoring special moments using uniforms, scrubs, favorite shirts, and more to make memory quilts and projects. And what I've been seeing, again, not new, but there is just a resurgence of this idea of making things, using materials that aren't new. Now, I have to say, as a quilt shop owner, I would always love for folks to come in and get all the fabrics, get all the things. But I would be remiss if I did not pay attention to the fact, right, that we are consumers, and consumerism causes excess. And so to the extent that we can, both support each other, but also repurpose what's out there, I think that's huge. I think that's important. So I love the fact that, you've connected and put all of those ideas into this book to help folks pull from what they have, right? And make special items, whether it's a quilt or a pillow or a table runner, to create these lasting memories. And of course, you connect it to your story. So let's talk a little bit about the book and some of your projects that you were gracious enough to send to me. So I'll be Vanna White, as you want talk through them and hold them up for folks to see.
And back, talking about buying new fabric,
Mm-hmm.
the thing, my goal with the book was to guide people through or give people formulas for making something unique looking that is more than just your typical squares of t-shirt quilts, but
Mm-hmm.
is still simple enough and accessible enough that people won't get overwhelmed of, I have to start from absolute scratch.
Yes.
And I was thinking about how, you never know what people are going to be pulling out to work with.
Mm-hmm.
T-shirt collections can get pretty wild, or even somebody's work shirts or something.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a pretty broad range of colors and patterns, and so how do you make it all work together?
Yeah. And
my solution to that is pair it with some newly purchased fabric from your quilt shop.
Yeah.
So like in this case, it's all the BDU, all the uniform fabrics, but it's the shades of red that tie it together.
Yes.
And I think in what I sent you, it's sort of natural colored shirts.
Yes.
And what they had kind of in common is they either went with this sort of rusty brown color or had a little bit of the rusty brown in them. And so there's dress shirts, flannel shirts. Maybe there was even I think there was 2 flannel shirts and like 3 pale plaid dress shirts. And then what pulled it all together is that rusty color.
And, which is also on the back, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was kind of the thing that ties everything together in the book is that you're going to take your collection of special fabrics that have already had their life. They're the story. And then you're going to pull them together, ground them with one or more accent fabric. Let's see.
Yes.
One of the quilts in the book has, here we go. So this one is the wonky stars, which I love. I am certainly not the first one to design wonky stars, but I think they really lend themselves well to a collection of shirts. In the story, it was my friend Gregory's dad's Pendleton shirts, and I used a gray wool flannel as the background to tie everything together. But then I also had some leftovers from another one of the projects from Angela's. And so I made Angela a second quilt here, which is that same wonky star pattern. But now I purchased again, a rusty color. I guess I was into that.
Yeah.
As the background, and then that makes all the florals look really good. And then you did your version of that same one.
I did.
The little creamy onesies, and you fussy cut wonderful little bits of the onesies for the center of the stars.
Yes, I loved it. I paired it with some Maywood flannels that were, that were coordinating fabrics. So it was a beautiful, soft, full bed quilt. The auntie wanted to make sure that her niece had a quilt that would grow along with her, and you were gracious enough to share the pattern with me so I could make the wonky stars. It is a fabulous pattern, and I will say it was easy to use. It was it was a simple pattern, but gave you a complex design, and you could use whatever fabrics you had. And I did have to stabilize the onesies, but they were just the cutest little things. It was onesies, dresses, all kinds of baby clothes. And so thank you for that. And it is fabulous to see. This is a table runner. Yes.
Yeah.
And it is beautifully done, beautifully stitched. And you can see, the flannels, you can see the shirting and the coordinating colors. And then you also shared this pillowcase as well. Tell us about this one.
So that was kind of the beginning of the whole story. Before I wrote the book, I had thought that maybe I would make quilts for service members or their families, and they could send me a uniform, and I would have, I think I had 6 designs to choose from in 4 different colorways that, you know, could all mix and match. And then I would make a quilt for people. And so my first design was that star kind of offset in a very, very plain background.
Show it again.
And that's Mike's story, or Mike's quilt in the gallery of the book.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes.
So there it is. And so I made the quilt. I gave it to Mike. took pictures, gave it to Mike, yes. And then I still had leftovers. And well, let me make a pillow. And so then I was doing a quilt and a pillow version of each design. Mm-hmm. And then I decided I didn't want to make quilts for other people. And so that's when I thought, well, if I wrote a book, then everybody could make their own quilts. And sure. Then it grew to be more than just using the military fabrics and just sort of anything that you wanted.
Yes.
And so in the book, here's that pillow, a little bit more finished. And then I had 2 other star designs that are the same scale. Mm-hmm. So you can do a trio of star pillows. And there's instructions on how to use part of your uniform or shirt for the back of the pillow, so you don't have to inset the zipper. But in the book, there is also instructions on putting a zipper in. Yeah. Also, there's a whole section that talks about prepping your fabrics. So whether you want to starch it or interface it, and what are the appropriate the pros and cons of different interfacings.
Yes. So. Yeah, I love that about your book too, is, you know, depending on your skill level and what you want to try, you have different options. So how to add a zipper for us folks who don't like zippers, that's just one of the things. I'll go back to the I'll go back to the book to get instruction on that. I'm a quilter, true and true. Whether or not you learn all the different ways you can treat and prepare your fabrics, there's instructions in there. There is a lot of information in your book outside of, you know, the patterns for design, and I love that. So I encourage everyone to pick up a copy of Quilt Your Story. Of course, we carry them in the shop, but wherever you get your
get it at Parliament Quilts and Crafts.
That's right. You know, but it is a wonderful, wonderful resource to have if you are considering, and I think everyone should, if you are considering creating a memory quilt or an item that honors memories and honors the people in your lives. I will certainly use that to work with some of my father's fabrics. My father has since passed, but we have some of his coveralls and and work uniforms, all of those things. So when I get inspired to make something, that is the first book that I will go to. So thank you for that.
And I've tried to make the patterns very adaptable too. You're showing the table runner, which is the pathway table runner, which is in the book. Mm-hmm. And then this quilt behind me is just an enlarged version. I just made more blocks and let it grow and grow and grow. Yeah. And this went to QuiltCon last year in 2024. Yeah. And actually, this morning, I finished quilting 2 baby quilts that a friend made using the same pattern. Wow. And they were great fun. They were kind of crazy. Yeah. But I tried to make things very adaptable. Mm-hmm. And speaking of QuiltCon, there's another pattern. The Landauer wanted me to do some wall art. And so I did this that's just half square triangles that I mounted onto a canvas frame.
Yes.
And it was a really great opportunity to pick a fabric to put in the center. And this is like 18 by 18 inches. So just, so big and hang on a wall. But then I thought, oh God, that would be really fun to make it really big.
Yes.
And so I used all my fabric masks that I had made from the basically 2.5 years we wore masks in the shop.
Yes.
And that went to QuiltCon this year.
Yes. And
it was purchased by the International Quilt Museum. So I was super excited about that.
Yes.
And apparently it'll be on display next year at some point. I don't know what the show is going to be, if it's going to be a, quilts from QuiltCon or COVID quilts or what. But it is now in Nebraska.
Oh, that's excellent. So, folks, those of you who still have masks and and things throughout the leftovers from the pandemic, there is hope. There are ways that you can use those.
That's right.
You have an example, and I'm just thrilled for you. One, because you continue to demonstrate what it means to use your talent, to be in shows, to, you've worked with this publisher who clearly recognizes your talent and asks for you to continue to make projects and things. And then you take them and expand and say, what if, right?
Yes.
Why not? I love that.
Yes.
And I think that's a common thing. Sometimes we get, as quilters, I'll speak for myself, sometimes I'll get restricted by the box, right? But it's able to, after a while, you get tired of that. And you're like, why not try this? What else can I do? Or you are forced, whether it be a mistake or you run out of fabric. So sometimes you're forced to improvise and you come up with something new and decide and make something different and equally as wonderful. So it seems you continue to do that. And I love watching it.
It's not brain surgery. Nobody dies if you make a mistake. You can just cut it up and try something different.
Yeah. People might not even know that it's a mistake, right?
Right. It's not a mistake if you figure out something to do with it.
Right. An intentional design choice is what we call them, right? Yeah. I love it.
It's not always intentional, but if you, it's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity. That's exactly right. So let's talk a little bit about your artistic journey, right? So you started out quilting. Let's talk a little bit about how you got to the point where you were, you wanted to write the book, and you've talked a little bit about it, but I'm thinking of quilters who you want to take the next step. So whether it's publishing, whether it is, okay, I want to move from making utility quilts to art quilts, and then I want to enter them in a competition. Tell us a little bit about that progression for you.
So relatively early on, when I was, so when I started quilting, I was living in Virginia when I started quilting, but it wasn't too long before we moved to Germany. And that's when I really had time because I wasn't working outside the house. Plus I was of the age where all my friends were having babies. And so that's when I really got into the quilting, and I started reading more books and just looking into it and looking for other quilters to connect to. And that's when the artist side of me was like, oh, blocks have names. Like I sketched out a Arthurian legend quilt with blocks that were like crown and castle and something, Lady of the Lake, all the block names that could be somehow tied to the Arthurian legend. I never made the quilt, but it was really fun to find all the blocks.
Right.
And so I'm, just looking at it from a creative side, and then starting blogging. And I got connected around the same time, got connected both with the Artful Quilters blog ring, because back in the early days of blogging, you could, there wasn't an algorithm. And so you would join a ring, and then everybody would have the little logo or a little link for the ring on their blog. And then you'd click that, you'd see the next person. And so I was part of the Artful Quilters blog ring. But I also learned about Studio Art Quilt Associates, which is a wonderful international organization dedicated to promoting art quilting. And so they've got a publication, they've got a great online resource, they've got members all over the world, and depending on where you are, there might be an active group that meets in person, and then they have local exhibits and international exhibits. And so I was kind of following SAQA, joined in, started seeing that there was interesting exhibits and thinking, do I have something that would be appropriate, or could I make something that would be appropriate for an exhibit? And then through the Artful Quilters blog ring, I was meeting these other art quilters and seeing what they were doing and trying out things that they were trying out, and got invited to join a group that we ultimately there was 12 of us who said yes. And so we called ourselves 12 by 12 and challenged each other every 2 months to make a 12-inch by 12-inch art quilt in response to a theme. And it was great fun to see how each person interpreted the theme. And we had so much fun and learned so much from each other and really pushed each other. Every time it was like, oh, I can't slack on this because I know she's going to go do something really amazing with this. Or, oh, last time she did something like this, I might want to try that technique. And we ended up publishing a book of our first 2 years worth of work. And then we were still having fun. So we did it. So the first 2 years worth were theme oriented. And then we did color palettes for another 2 years. And then we changed up our format, and it was 20 by 12, because we started it off in 2012. Or did we finish it? 2012. Anyways, we did 2012. So now we had a big, long, tall rectangle to work with. But that was just really, really informative for me in terms of trying out different things, getting feedback. It's like having an art crit group, and then also encouraging each other to enter exhibits and to think about our art as art. We were looking at ways to share it, and so started out at the I think the first time it was the grouping was displayed was at the International Quilt Festival in Houston, also Australia to their big quilt festival, and then a couple of little sort of more gallery type places. And there was 3 lawyers in the group, and so they took care of the whole book thing. They were reading the contracts. And
all the fine type.
Right. By the time I decided that maybe I wanted to do a book, I could see, okay, this is what we did in 12 by 12. I get what a proposal might look like. And so I submitted to like 9 different publishers, and only got response back from, I got a couple of no's, and then Landauer, and then a whole bunch ghosted, just no response at all. I am probably not the person to talk to about your great book career, but I'm really glad that I did it. And I know that my 12 by 12 experience informed the book in terms of kind of knowing what I wanted going in, and being able to compare like advance, was I getting a fair advance? I could say, yeah, actually, compared to 12 by 12. And if the lawyers were cool with that, then I should be cool with this because they're
right. I think it's awesome, Kristin. It's important for folks who are aspiring to publish or work with groups to publish to understand the realities of it, right? And the reality is, with anything that you submit, whether it's books or whether it's with pieces for competition or pieces for festivals, right? You have to go through the process, and you probably will get no's, and you probably will create things that won't get in until you actually create something that gets in. And it can all be subjective. There are
absolutely
other factors that play into it, but I think it's the process, the journey to get there is as important as the end goal, right? So
right.
What is the walk? And the walk is, all right, I'm going to work with a group of people. We're going to build based on themes. I have to be accountable to this group. And then I want to take this next phase, and we're all going to do this together. It's just so much to that I think is important for folks to, just pay attention to, if that's the direction in which you want to.
Right. And if you don't have a group to collaborate with, you can do things on your own. And what I've learned is that a 50-50 success record is actually pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of reasons something gets rejected from a show. It might just not fit in with the other things. I tried getting into QuiltCon for many years, and I thought I had some pretty darn interesting work that would appeal to the modern quilter, but the Modern Quilt Guild didn't think that my aesthetic was appropriate. And that doesn't mean that what I did wasn't worthy or good. It just wasn't appropriate for that venue.
Right.
Now I think their definition of a modern quilt has expanded, and now I actually fit in a little bit better. I was still flabbergasted to get quilts in 2 years in a row. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Back to the 50-50. I just sort of, if you go in assuming no, then that occasional yes feels really good.
Right.
But you just got to try, because it might be that your quilt kind of sucks, but it might also be that it's just not the right thing, or they have too many that look kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
There's already 50 gajillion improv piece looking stuff, and so they're going to choose something that's English paper piecing over your improv because they've already got 10 improv quilts.
Sure.
So just try it, and try your local. I'm super lucky in Portland, Oregon, where I am, that we've got a lot of quilt opportunities.
Yeah.
And, we've got Sisters Quilt Show, which will take absolutely anything until they run out of space.
For sure.
And that is so much fun because there's so much variety. And that's a great way, if you're organized and you can pay attention. Like if you're thinking, ooh, I want to enter something into the Sisters Quilt Show, do it now. There's space. Won't say no.
Good to know.
Right? Or maybe your local guild show. We've got guild shows, and I think parts of the guild shows are, if you're in the guild, your work's going to be displayed, and parts are maybe juried. And, why not? I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want anybody to jury, to judge my quilt, because I don't want to hear negative things about it if they don't choose it, or if it doesn't win a ribbon. And I get that, and that's fine, but it doesn't hurt to just see what they have to say.
Yeah.
I submitted 3 quilts to a local show, and it seems like everything that was submitted got in, and then they judged from all of that. And I got two of the 3 quilts got ribbons. And they all were, the comments on all of them were excellent use of color, be more precise in your piecing.
Mm. Wow.
I know. Okay, fine.
Right.
There's always room for improvement.
Yeah. Well, that feedback is important though, right? And
Yeah. And don't take the feedback personally.
right.
It's not a reflection on you as a good or bad person.
Right.
It's just something to think about with your quilting. And you can take the piece, I look at the feedback and I say, yeah, I know I'm always going to try to piece better, but I am human. And I am also just not the type of human that plans things out super much in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is an element of wonky in everything that I do. I'm kind of walking this line between control and chaos.
Sure.
And the quilt judges are looking for absolute control.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can look at their comments and say, well, I understand you would like this to be more controlled, but that's just not me. So I'm going to say thank you very much and continue to do my thing and still continue to, do it better and better. But I think I'm always going to be could be a little more precise.
Yeah. No, but I like that though, because you know yourself and you know your style and you know your skills, right? So, I've been in situations where, again, you share things, you want feedback, but you worry a little bit. You haven't really defined your artistic voice. You may not be as confident for whatever reason. And so, to your point about people being reluctant to enter into these competitions or, to work with others because of the feedback, maybe it's because, folks are not necessarily confident in their style or in their voice or what have you. But I find that the more I am the truer I am to myself and how I want to work and design and create, the better equipped I am, as you just mentioned, to handle that feedback, right? You take it, you receive it, you decide what you want to do with it. And if at one point you want to create this well-controlled, piece, then at least you have feedback that says, all right, this, maybe you need to consider this or do this. If not, then you can just be as wonky and as free thinking and free form quilting as you want to be. So,
absolutely. And I think it just takes doing a thing over and over. It's practice. Try submitting things, and there will be failures and failures and failures, and then there will be a success, and then maybe some more failures, and then maybe a success, and probably some more failures. And I shouldn't even call them failures. Some stuff will get in, and some stuff won't, and some stuff will have nice feedback, some stuff might not. And the more you do, the more work you do, the more feedback you hear, and maybe you start out just with feedback among friends. Where it's a little bit more of a safe space. But the more you do it, the more you hear it, the more you learn what you're willing to accept and what you can just blow off and say, well, yeah, that's great feedback, but that's not appropriate to what I was trying to accomplish.
Yes.
Or you can go, oh yeah, you're right. Next time I am going to work harder on mitering my corners.
Yeah.
And you also get to know who you are.
Sure.
The more you do of,
sure,
what it is that you really enjoy doing, because you try all the things and then you're like, oh, I didn't enjoy that. That sucked. Right. But I really liked this. I think I want to go back and do more of that. Right.
No, that's exactly. I know I make a bag or two every now and then, but I know bags are not my thing. You know why? Because I don't like zippers. I just can't get over it yet. I just can't get to it yet. But I know that I love paper piecing, and I do love traditional blocks, so you do, after you have to do the thing, just to double click on what you said. You have to do the thing to know what you don't like to do as well. And that's equally as important, right?
Right. You've learned something. You've learned what you don't like to do. So you don't have to do that anymore.
Right. And that is why there are no failures, right? So because you
Right.
go
You learn
through
something.
that process. You learn something. I love it, love it, love it, love it. So what is, you've done so many things, you've had so many experiences, and you continue to learn and grow. What is the next big thing for you? Is there something that you aspire to do that you haven't, or is there something that you aspire to do because you have and you just continue, you love it so much?
Oh gosh. I'm gonna keep making art quilts.
Mhm.
That's for sure. And I there was a while when I was thinking that art quilts were were the thing, and I was going to be a studio artist and get my arts into my quilts into shows and maybe galleries and maybe sell them. And then I realized, no, that just requires a whole lot of work and even more self-promotion. And I suck at self-promotion. That's something I found out that I
Okay.
don't do well, is the
Yes.
self-promotion.
Gotcha.
And so I decided to get myself a full-time or day job, a real job.
Mhm.
Um, but luckily one where I can still be creative and be surrounded by quilts and fabric. And then the art quilts are more of a hobby I take
Mhm.
seriously, and I want to do very, very well,
Yeah.
but it's a hobby. So I'm not making a ton of work, but there's always something going on in the background.
Mhm.
Your questions to me had a technique that I'd like to try and get better
Yes.
at.
Yeah.
And I was super inspired by a couple of quilts that I saw at QuiltCon. One of them called Bubbles? No, not Bubbles. Effervescence. It was purple and green bubbles on a purple background, or
Mhm.
green circles on a purple background, kind of bubbling up by on Instagram. She's Joe Woe, and I'm going to screw up her last name, Wolschlager. Anyway, she's here in Portland. She's an amazing person, also a graphic designer by trade.
Nice.
But she can piece a circle so good, so
Wow.
amazing. And so I want to learn how to piece circles like Joe.
Mm.
that's my that's my goal. Piece some circles like Joe.
Piece some circles like Joe. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Okay. Well, that is a testament to the fact that there's always something new that we can learn. It's important to be a part of a community. I think quilting can be an isolated, activity, but we know from history, we know, from current events that it is always, in my opinion, better to be connected and be part of a community doing what you love, to get feedback, to get inspiration, to work together. We see all the images. We know the images of, quilters sitting around the quilt frame. Now, while we all have our own machines, we sit around our tables together quilting. We commune at different events and conventions. It really is still a powerful thing, right? To be in community with other quilters, with other artists. You and I became friends as part of a small group around at the Quilt Craft Industry Alliance. I'll put a little plug in for that.
Yeah.
Where we were part of what we call a mastermind group, right? For folks who had brick and mortar shops and worked in brick and mortars. And so, it was a wonderful thing before Parliament Quilts and Crafts became a thing. It was just an idea to sit and be in community with other owners who were also crafters and artists. That was huge, huge, huge. So, and you have continued to be not only a friend, but a resource, a thought partner, a supporter, and a source of inspiration for me. So I just want to say thank you. I'm one of your biggest, I'm going to say, I'm one of your bigger fans, maybe not your biggest fans, but I'm a huge, huge fan. And I just enjoy watching you work and learning from you. So you folks, if you have not already paid attention to Kristin LaFlamme, please do. Tell us where we can, or tell everyone where they can find you in your work.
So I am only on Instagram. I have this tiny little bubble, but you can find me at Kristin LaFlamme, and you can see my name right there, spelled just like that, but run it all together on Instagram. And there's all kinds of stuff on my Instagram. I thought maybe I would, curate it to be just my art quilts, but no, it's whatever. So there's a lot of art quilts. There's some clothing. There's some political ranting every now and then. I just can't help it. And then some fun travel and food. But it's mostly what inspires me.
Yes. All of the things that make up Kristin. So
yeah.
wonderful.
And that is kind of important to know that we are not just one thing. We are all as creatives, everything that comes out of our hands or our mouths, depending on what or our bodies, everything that comes out of our bodies as creatives is influenced by our entire lives, not just what other creative things we're doing or paying attention to or communing with, but just our environment, our physical environment, our mental environment. It's all tied together.
Yes. And in this day and age, without going on a particular rant one way or the other, I will always say that art brings us together. Art keeps us sane, right?
Absolutely.
So we find our way to it as a means of release, as a means of respite, as a means of expression.
As a way to communicate, art can start conversations.
Yes.
I think my social commentary quilts, the reason I do them is because I want to have conversations. I'm kind of working something out with myself, but then I throw it out there to the greater world, and am always very curious, how do other people take it? What feelings do the quilts bring up? What thoughts, what conversations can the viewer have with me or with the quilt or with the person standing next to them?
I love it, right? How you consume your pieces. You can consume your pieces in a number of ways, right?
Yeah.
You can have conversations. It sparks conversation. It's a way to think. You're looking at the art. You're looking at the technique. But then, of course, you always find it may spark something. It may spark an inner dialogue that viewers and people who even touch them, have with themselves and with the piece. So love it. All right. Yay. Well, I appreciate you, Kristin, for joining us. Folks, I will include the links, some of the resources that Kristin has shared and that we've discussed in the box below. So take a look, investigate, see what's out there. Remember, take good care and make good quilts, and we'll hope to see you around the way soon. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you.
Thank you so much, LaTanya. It's been so fun.
You are so welcome. All right. Bye-bye.